how will you get it? You get it from subtracting the corneal component of wavefront from the total wavefront. But when you were acquiring these two data, you had different positions, because you positioned for wavefront and you positioned for the cornea. And but it is useful. So about 5 or 6 years ago, we met several people who work with Tracy, thinking about this, how to avoid this subtracting of two not very correlated things, because different positions, different systems of coordinates. And an idea came to me to cross the cornea in the same point. So, and go in the lens two different traces, and then to compare these two different traces. The principle, I will use 1 or 2 minutes to explain you the principles of gray tracing. You see here the schematic. Let me try to. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. Yeah. No, it doesn't work. So in schematic, you see the laser and you see the acousto-optic deflector. In the center of scanning is put the front focus of the collimating lens. So as an output from the collimating lens, you have the parallel rays, parallel beams. So you scan and in angle, the laser is scanned in the acousto-optic deflector scan in angle, but at the exit of the lens, collimating lens, you have parallel beams entering the eye. On the black quadrant on the top, you see the points of entrance into the eye. They are regular points in several circles, outer circle, internal circle, six circles with the points. And on the right lower bottom, you see the black quadrant with the points. Which are the points? It's the projection on the retina. When you have the projections on the retina, you have the coordinates on the retina, and you have the coordinates of entrance into the eye, so you can calculate the tilt. So you have all information to build the map. Here is the main block of ray tracing instrument. The laser, which is in the lower part here, you see the arrow to the left, then top, then to the right, to the exit from the unit. And parallel beams enter the eye, are projected on the retina, then measured with the detectors. Detector measures the position, and you reconstruct the whole map. And the idea to have this Q ray tracing, you see the blue rays that we would like to put a little bit tilted, and then red rays tilted in opposite direction. So you have two projections, one tilted and one, for example, directed internally and one externally, and you have two projections. How to do that? And the idea came from the publication which was made by MacLeod in 1954 in the Journal of the Optical Society of America. He call this optical element is axicon. Axicon means axial imaging. So axicon projects the image not into the point, but along the axis. So it is why it is called axicon. 50 years later, Januszewicz, a Polish guy with two co-authors from Sweden, published an article which is like a humor. Axicon, the most important optical element. It's of course was a little bit of smile, and you see the painting of Vermeer with it's called Girl with a Pearl Ring. You see the pearl ring in the air? It means the most important optical element. It's a comparison. But MacLeod was not correct completely, because optical surfaces were known earlier. So you see here the publications about conical surfaces and even about application in the oscilloscope in 1904. So it was not so new, but still new for many people, and many optical engineering decided to put it somewhere, to use it somehow. So we were not an exclusion. We did the same. We thought maybe we could use it for our purposes. And really, what happens if you put the beam through the axicon? It makes a circles configuration, and the distribution inside is a Vasyl function, which is much more steep than the input, which is normally Gaussian. But it was not interesting for us. We were interested to find the cross point. The cross point, if you take a ray and you take another ray, they cross in some point. So, and now the configuration was proposed, which works like this. You have two rays crossing in the plane. You see the plane where they cross. You move these 2 points, but the crossing is in the same plane. So the entrance points are at the same distance from each other along the diameter of this length of this axicon, and you go this way. Another possibility, look, move. You can move the cross point along the axis. And you may move the cross point over any surface in 3D space, like for example, through the cornea. So this idea was realized in our aberrometer, where instead of parallel pointing the eye, we put tilted beams like this, and you get the response of the detector. Then you make another probing, you get another coordinate on the detector, and you go through each point of entrance. If you have, for example, a circle of points at the entrance to the axicon, and you project the tilted beam, blue beam, which is tilted, and you project, and you get the projection on the retina. Then you project another tilted beam, and you get another projection. So we have 2 projections. So the average, the mean value between them is what we call regular aberration data. Here is an example of two such trajectories on the retina. And if you calculate the differences between their positions, you will get the map of non-homogeneity of the lens. So this is the solution of the problem. Thank you. No questions. Okay, it means no interest or no problem.
Perhaps you could just explain the color coding here in this diagram on the right. Are we seeing both the horizontal tilt and the vertical tilt in one diagram?
We have, David, we have the detectors. We have horizontal and vertical lines of detectors, so that is y, x, and y. And here you have the retinal spot diagram, which is in one of the softwares. It's not so important, but you see the trajectory of the beam on the retina, with the tilted blue tilted one direction, the red tilted other direction. Okay, no more? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Agata Gut, and it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about optical coherence tomography, speckle-based retinal layer segmentation. The development of optical coherence tomography with an emphasis on the registration of ocular structures such as retina is essential, and therefore there is an important question to ask. How to perform retinal layer segmentation, obviously. To answer this kind of a conundrum, two main decisions need to be made. The first one is about the approach, which can be either traditional or based on machine learning. The traditional approach generates appearance terms based on either gradient or intensity information. The machine learning techniques, on the other hand, have dominated the field of retinal layer segmentation with techniques such as deep learning and elements such as convolutional neural networks. The second decision to be made is about the presence of speckle. In highly scattering tissue images, speckle can be viewed dually, as a source of noise or as a source of information. In the last 2 decades, speckle has been mostly viewed in the perspective of denoising techniques that gain popularity and importance. However, in this approach, we aimed to perform retinal layer segmentation that would utilize the information from the speckle and would be based on traditional methods. And that statement leads to the formulation of the procedure of the algorithm's steps. And to begin with, let's move to the first one. Its idea is simple. 100 unaveraged OCT retinal B scans are required from an OCT instrument such as Revo 80. Then, a single non-averaged retinal D scan is chosen out of the group thus created. And with this information, while taking into account the second step of the procedure, that is the preliminary pre-processing stage, the actual method begins. And when started thinking about the approach of the segmentation, the first idea was to perform the morphological pre-processing that would extract the layers in a simple set of steps. And to begin with, a single B scan previously selected is taken into account. Then, the threshold mass is set by the use of binarization of 2D grayscale image. And that procedure would discard some groups of points below that set threshold value. Then, the image is cropped if necessary to get rid of that unnecessary image burdens, and then the range for the analysis is set. In our case, to focus on the foveal region. After that, further operations are applied on the threshold mask. That is, the morphological operations like erosion and dilatation. And the result of this task is the morphological cohesive mask that would be used to extract the ILM layer, that is the outermost layer of retina. Although the procedure is effective, it's still unable to perform segmentation in a deeper located layers. And therefore, the idea of performing the segmentation throughout the entire image needed to be introduced. And that idea starts with the universal preprocessing that takes into account the previously selected scan and applies the inverse logarithmic transformation. And that inverse logarithmic transformation is used to restore the original statistics of the V-scan tissue image, and it's also applied to emphasize the multiplicative characteristic of changes in the pixels. And with that information, the third step, the windowing with Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, can be proceeded. To start with, let's divide the image vertically into columns called A matrices. Then, the statistical moving window is applied to the certain currently analyzed column. The window will move from the top to the bottom of an image in such a way that the common part of the previously and the currently analyzed window contains the certain number of overlapping points. And then, after scanning a given A matrix, the window moves to another consecutive column of the image until the whole information is collected. Such a statistical moving window has its own parameters, like window length and window width. It's also divided into two parts, A segment 1 and A segment 2. And that information leads to the two-sample Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. The two-sample Kolmogorov-Smirnov test is a non-parametric hypothesis test that evaluates the difference in distance between the two cumulative distribution functions of the distributions of two sample data vectors in the range of X, some sort of set range. And there are two important pieces of information that are results from the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test procedure. That is the p-values and the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test statistics. And for all collected p-values, the alpha level of significance is set to search for the logical values below that given limit. And that all information about the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test analysis and with the information about the locations of points in the whole columns in the V-scan, enable to show the points of statistical significance of the segmentation. But to visualize it even better, the next procedure needs to be done. That is, the indexes of change in logical values are found in a vertical range. And then the rectangular-like areas that are defined by indexes that change in logical values from 0 to 1, and then from 1 to 0, are defined as segments. And now let's take a look in the illustrative example, 3 examples to be exact, to then introduce the minimum segment width criterion. That minimum segment width criterion is introduced to choose the segments that are wide enough to perform the analysis of the changes in p-values in the limits of that segment. And after that, within each of the segments, the p-value minimum is searched for. And with the information about the p-value minima from all the segments, the matrix of the points of statistical significance is built. Although the result is, again, satisfactory, it still contains points in their unsorted form. And to deal with this problem, the battleship game needs to be introduced. But to be exact, the players of the battleship game, like the users of the algorithm, can detect the shapes and more or less the locations of the anatomical layers that they are looking for. But the algorithm is on the other side of the board game, and to win the game, it needs the parameters of the ships. And at the perspective of the algorithm, that information is describes the groups of points that need to be assigned to the certain layers, that is their spatial orientation, dimensions, etc. And that guidelines, sort of, are included in the fourth step of the algorithm, that is the DB scan. DB scan is a density-based clustering algorithm that main assumption is that clusters are the regions in space of higher density surrounded by the regions of lower density. And there are two main parameters of the DB scan: the epsilon and the minimal number of points. The epsilon defines the radii of an ellipse of the cluster search, and the minimal number of points resonates with that certain density level of the group to be considered as a cluster, not an outlier. And the DB scan performs the formulation of the subgroups of the layers that are horizontal to each other and that are quite close to each other. And then you can see the DB scan result works out quite nicely. However, it still contains the subgroups instead of single cohesive anatomical layers. And to solve this problem, you would say the intuitive answer would be to connect these subgroups. But how to do it? And then the concatenation idea is introduced. And the illustrative example of that process is the base cluster idea. Let's take a look at the base cluster. The base cluster has its minimum and maximum vertical points, and to concatenate the base cluster with the other clusters, the two main criteria need to be introduced. The first one, quite intuitive, is the distance criterion that would concatenate the B cluster with the base cluster. However, this criterion is insufficient as it comes to the situation of C and D. Although C is closer to the base cluster, the D is intuitively a more suitable candidate. And that's why the linear match criterion is introduced to perform successful concatenation. And with that idea of connecting the subgroups to form the layers, the result of the algorithm can be shown. That is the illustrative result of the retinal layer segmentation algorithm on an average retinal B scan. And at this point, as it comes to the prospects of further work, of course, the prospect includes the optimization of steps of the algorithm, testing another databases, performing statistical analysis, etc. But most importantly, the idea of development is based on the idea of multi-segmentation. The idea of multi-segmentation began when we observed that the order of averaging the scans affects the results. And to visualize this, let's come back to the group of 100 unaveraged retinal B scans And to make the things easy, let's name it as the set of X with elements from X1 to X100. Now, two ways of choosing a B-scan for segmentation can be performed. The first way of choice is the idea of taking into account the element of set of X that is non-average scan that contains the information from speckle. And the second choice can be the averaging the set of X and performing one individual result for segmentation. And after performing the segmentation on that two approaches, you can see that the results differ from each other. And the thesis is that the non-averaged scan obtains better results. And to continue with this idea even further, the idea of performing segmentation of the elements of the set of X in the loop is introduced. And that is the basis for the multi-segmentation idea. The first step of the multi-segmentation idea is considering the set of X. The second step is the image registration. That idea is mainly focused on adjusting the spatial orientation of the scans to the one base scan. And then, after that adjustments, that is the registration process, the segmentation can be performed on the individual retinal B scans, and after that, the average result can be obtained. And as you can see at the bottom of the slide, the average single segmentation method is presented to compare the multi-segmentation method, and that average single segmentation takes into account the set of X, it averages its elements, and performs segmentation on the average result. And as you can see, the multi-segmentation method has its potential in the task of retinal registration techniques in the OCT technology. And finally, to conclude, the take-home message is that the approach of performing retinal layer segmentation based on utilizing the speckle information and traditional methods can be introduced and should be taken into account while developing the technology of OCT retinal layer segmentation. And my last sentence in my presentation is the honest thank you to all the people that supported me. That is the signal processing laboratory in Wrocław University of Science and Technology, and especially thank you, Professor Iskander, for being there and making that idea real. Thank you.
Presentation. The idea of segmentation of retina is very popular nowadays, and I wonder, because there's a number of papers where non-traditional approaches are utilized, and the authors claim that they can segment all 10 layers of retina with ease. Okay, I'm not sure if it is okay, if they're right, but why did you choose the traditional way, which seems to be quite complicated? I see many steps. I worked for some time in image processing, and I know that every step introduces a kind of error. Okay, so if you combine many steps, you can end up with a very serious error in processing. Okay, it was slightly shown in your examples, because, for example, if you average an image, you get a completely different result. Okay, so that's the explanation of the difficulties that we have. So, what is the motivation to use the traditional way, which seems to be very demanding, and not move to the neural network approach?
That's an excellent question because that approach was aimed to be an alternative for the machine learning approaches, and like I said the previous slide, we were interested in searching for the information contained in a speckle, that is the performing segmentation on the non-average scans, and that process is much more complicated than the average one. Maybe you can see the differences in the quality of that two scans. The first one is the average scan is quite blurred to the non-average approach, and that's why we aimed to perform the method that would give information from the more raw data, I would say, and also we compared the methods with another algorithms like Castrol, like OCD RedSec, etc. And to summarize that, there are also, that's a work in progress, yes? There are also a few things to work on. For example, there are a lot of parameters that can be adjusted, and that could be helpful in the medical field because sometimes you want to emphasize different layers, and the parameters can be adjusted individually depending on the case. Yes, I think that's
okay. I have also a suggestion that, sorry, based on my experience, I think that it would be good to try other denoising filters or denoising techniques, because averaging this kind of noise, which is kind of similar to the multiplication noise, gives rather bad results.
Yeah.
It's very similar to trying to denoising salt and pepper noise using a Gaussian filter. You get something that is not really good. Okay, so it's better not to filter salt and pepper noise than to filter it and to show somebody.
Yeah, I didn't mention
Thank you very much.
that on the processing stage we also had that little step of cutting off the floor noise, so it was like 0.05. And that was included, but maybe yes, that idea should be developed. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, can I just make a comment? I'm sort of co-author, and Agata thanked me, and I would like to also thank Agata being with me. Agata started 2 years ago when she was in high school, so she just finished her first year. But just to answer your question, this is the whole idea that we are different and we are focusing on extracting information from that noise. So we're not interested in denoising, we are interested in extracting information from noise. For us, the noise is what attracts us. The noise actually represents, not directly but indirectly, the information that it is in the microstructure. So, and we are looking at the microstructure rather than the macrostructure of the layers. And we've got plans to extract more information from that noise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This discussion is fascinating, but we have to move forward. So, Fern, it's time to speak again.
Hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here after 10 years again in Kosovo and to meet a lot of friends. So I'm sharing today the work that we do with Erasmus MC in Rotterdam. So about the detection of coin photoreceptors in adaptive optics. I want to explain how the technology works, how the wavefront corrections work, because this was already discussed in other talks. But I would like to mention that we used RTX1 adaptive optics camera, which pretty much corrects for the aberrations that result from the anterior segment of the eye, and with that we can just increase the resolution of the images that we get and can go in vivo microscopic imaging. And so when we get like an image with this camera, so it looks like here at the center So it looks very small. So it looks very small, so it's 4 by 4 degrees, so you can see how it compares with the SLO image, which is 30 by 30, or even with the wide field color fundus image, which is, in this case, the 133 degrees. So this means when we acquire these kind of images, you always need to acquire a couple of images in order to create like a montage. And the way how people do montage so can differ so depending on your use case, on what you want to do with these kind of images. So this is the protocol that we have at Erasmus MC, and we designed this for our case, which is focused on retinitis pigmentosa. Nevertheless, then what you do is just create a montage, and this is the resulting of the montage. And for instance, you can just focus on a specific part of the image, and then you can see this kind of structures here. So this information are the cones, so you can see all of them there, and what the theory says is that the information that we see here of the cones just comes between, from the information between the inner and outer segment of the cones, so here. But then the question is, okay, we have these nice images, and actually adaptive optics has been in the market for a while. 10 years ago, it was already in the market when we were at the same VPO here in Crosswell. But the question is, how can we extract information from these images? How can we make this useful for the clinical practice? And so there is some software, and the gold standard actually is the AO-FIO. So the majority of the papers that you find in the literature, so they use this kind of software from Imaging Eyes, which is a robust software, it's nice software, it shows a lot of results, but it has a limitation, which is the region of interest. So it's limited to 80 by 80 pixels. And in this specific case, which is a 4 by 4 degrees image, the size of the image is 1500 by 1500 pixels. And in our case, which is a montage, so it's 9000 by 6000 pixels. So which makes this kind of analysis very difficult in our specific case. So our work is about this, so it's about to explore, develop, and validate automated approaches for analyzing the point photoreceptors in these kind of images. In Rotterdam, we already developed a kind of long pipeline, which I will not explain everything here. I will just briefly mention. So let me just guide you through. So we select a couple of images first, and then we just do a kind of image selection based on signal-to-noise ratio and other parameters. We do the Vasyl shadow segmentation, and then we divide the images in different kind of patches. And based on these patches, then we do a kind of classification. We say, look, there are cones in these images that we can either segment, or there are no cones. And if there are no cones, then what we do is unsupervised pattern recognition. So we just divide different kind of patterns which are linked to different kind of diseases. I will not cover this part here. I will focus on the upper part, which is the automated detection of the point photoreceptors. So for this part, we started with a data set of adaptive optics images. We divided it in patches, as I said, and then we divided it in training and testing set. And for the testing set, so we had a specific overlap as well in the patches in order to calculate the intra-grader agreement. Then we had like 4 graders. So the training set was annotated by 2 different graders from Erasmus MC, but the testing set was annotated by some 2 graders, but also graded from University Hospital of Ghent, and another one from the Western University of Australia. And I must say, the interesting part here is that one grader had 3 months of experience, and another one had 10 years of experience. And then once we shared the images with the different graders, there was this question is like, I mean, although that we look at the images and we see the cones, but then there are specific cases that we are not so sure whether it is a cone or not. And the problem of these images is that there are no standards for what should be considered a cone. So this has been the problem in the field actually, and the limitation for including it in clinical practice. And So what we did was to came up with something very simple. So we said that let's make something, the first rule, something that we can share with the graders, then let's see how it goes. So in this case was that we said that the cone should be like a round characteristic structure, and it should have like intensity peak, which should follow more or less a Gaussian distribution, and it should have like a similar size and spacing compared to the neighboring structures. And I say similar, not like a fixed, because the size of the cones also change from the fovea to the periphery, and this is something very important as well. So then, the question was, so what kind of quality or metric can we use to evaluate then the performance of our model or to compare the results of the graders? Because as you can imagine, it's such a problem when you do the annotation, even if you are just a few pixels from the center of the cell, it's still the same cell, but when you use like other metrics like dice-score, will not work. So what we did was just to set our own metric, and it was based on a radial distance. So if it was within a certain distance, the second dot, then we call it a true positive. If it was not the case, it was a false positive. And then based on that, we could calculate the precision recall, and then we used the F1 score as our evaluation metric. Right, so then we proceeded. So then we just trained UNet. So this is the basics or the standards in terms of image segmentation. So did the hyperparameter optimization, something that Alejandro was also trying to explain today as well, how it works. And then we checked the intra and intergraded agreement. But let me make one step back, because then we had the results of the model, and we wanted to know how good the model was. Because when you check in the literature, so there are no AI models so far published for the detection of the cones. And a way to see how good the model is to look at intra-graded and intergraded agreement first. And what we saw is that for the intra-graded agreement, so it was for the F1 score, so it was 85 around the fovea, then going down up to 80 in the periphery. And the intergraded agreement was not so different from that. So in the case of the periphery was 76%, which is good, because I said before that we had a grader with 3 months of experience and another grader with 10 years of experience, which means that the annotation criteria that we were giving to the graders was doing a nice job. So then we had these kind of values, but still we wanted to have a ground truth. And the way how we defined the ground truth was pretty much with a voting system. So if 3 graders say that, 3 of the 4 say that, okay, this is a cell, then we consider it a cell. If they were not agreeing between them, we said that this is not a cell. And then what we did was, after creating that kind of ground truth, we compared it with our model. And the results of the model were very good, so it was 87% around the fovea, 81% so in the periphery, and we also compared it with AO-FIO, which is the gold standard in the literature. And we saw that the model performs much better than the AO-FIO, so the manufacturer software. Mainly in the periphery, and I also must say here, uncorrected for the AO-FIO, and this is very important. Because AO-FIO is also software that should be a semi-annotation tool, and a lot of times when we see like papers and literature, people just don't take that in account, but it's something that is important to mention. So software does annotation, but you should always do also the correction of that. All right, so then this is the result of the prediction, so of the model, so you can see how it performs here more in the periphery, but you can also see how it performs when you have like a vessel shadow. So you can see that it's not predicting pretty much where you have the vessel shadows. It's not, the cones are not there, it's just, there is just no signal there. And then we create like a density map, as you can see here, so you can see that the density of the cones is increasing as you approach the fovea. And then we also run it for the n-type montage, so which was our protocol that I mentioned at the beginning. And by doing so, by running our models, so this is how it looks like. So you see the density with red, that's the highest density of the cones. And you may notice right now that at the center here, we should have actually the highest density of the cones, and that's not the case. right? It's not because of the model is not working nicely, the model is working, but it's because of the imaging technology doesn't have enough resolution to detect all the cones. So as you might know, so the cones there are, the spacing between the cones is very small, and then the resolution of the device is of 2 micron. Nevertheless, this information, and by building normative databases, can still be used to correlate with diseases. For instance, if you see an increase here of the cones, it may mean, for instance, in case of Stargardt disease, where you start to have like spacing between the cones and now you are able to detect. So it's like you are losing cones actually. And finally, can we bring it a step closer to the clinical research? Because a lot of times we, like scientific researchers, we do a lot of nice tools or nice software, but it never reaches the clinical research. And I think that we also have the obligation to bring it a step closer to the clinical research, to ophthalmologists or optometrists. And that's what we always try to do, and for that we developed software, which I'm showing now for the first time, and where you can just like pretty much import folder or just a single image. You can select the model that you want to run. So you can just select all the images. So you can detect montage for a single image. So we see here that it's like running the model for the images, so you can just let it run. So if you just open one of the images, you see the montage, you see the prediction, you can just zoom in if you want. You see the Vasyl shadow segmentation, which is another model that we have implemented. Then you also see the cone density, and then you can also extract metrics of the cone density as a function, or once you detect where the fovea is. And pretty much this summarizes the work that I want to share here with you today, and I would like to thank the people that also collaborate with me from Erasmus MC, Sander and Louise, and people from Rotterdam Eye Hospital, and from University of Ghent, Lions Institute, and Imaging Eyes as well for the support. Thank you.
The question, but I see a problem with RTX1. I was very eager when it was introduced to the market, but the problem is that you can get good images of high quality when you have young subjects, young patients. When people start cataract, early cataract, almost invisible, for example in an optometric examination, then this machine gives very difficult to analyze images. So if you think about clinical application, there is a natural problem. The pathologies usually are age-related, but also cataract is age-related. So you cannot analyze the state of the retina in this way when you have, for example, a 60-year-old patient. Okay, so it's always a question how to use it to not partially, but to have very good technique. But it's of course very interesting, it's worth developing, but could you comment on this problem of scattering light in the intraocular lens that makes the images much worse?
Sure, definitely. So cataract, for instance, is an issue, and but it's also an issue like on fundus imaging normally. Right, so usually you should use RTX1 when you are able to acquire nice images with OCT or fundus images. If you are not able to acquire nice images with those, you shouldn't be using the RTX. And actually, I would say that the advantage of this technology is for the early detection of diseases, actually. And it has a lot of potential in diseases like retinitis pigmentosa, Stargardt, where you don't see any changes in the photoreceptors layer in OCT, but you can already see a decrease in the cell density, for instance, in OCT. And it has also other applications that we are working in Rotterdam, which is to see the recovery from after of surgeries. For instance, in macro how the photoreceptors recover after the surgery, and we get like really nice results. We can see the follow-up. We just don't see differences only in the OCT itself, but we see differences in the AO images. And I think that AO has a lot of potential, but we just need to point, let's say, the highlights to the right direction as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that it underlines the current opinions in the bibliography that multimodal techniques are the future, because each technique has its own limitations, but if you combine, for example, OCT with some other techniques, you can get something that is very, very useful. And
yes, let me just add to that, there is a device that the M2 OCT that also combines adaptive optics with other imaging modalities, with OCTA, OCT, and SLO, and you can get really nice images from that.
Thank you very much.
Please thank the speaker again.
Welcome everyone. As Eric said, I will talk about the reaction of small vessels, retinal vessels, to the full field flicker stimulation. This is the outline of my presentation. I will briefly explain what is functional hyperemia and how we can divide retinal microvasculature, and then I will move to the experiment and talk about it a little bit. Okay. If you want to stimulate the eye with flickering visual stimuli, it causes the increase of inner retinal neurons activity. This increases the blood flow to the retina. Close to the fovea, in the inner retina, the ganglion cells layer is thin and is getting the thickness around 4 degrees, and then the thickness decreases again. And also, the red blood cells velocity profile in bigger vessels has a parabolic shape. In smaller vessels, it's totally different. The cross-section of RBC velocity is constant. The retinal vasculature supplies cells of inner and middle layers of retina with oxygen and nutrition, but the metabolic demand may change due to various factors. So, how the functional hyperemia is generated? Visual stimulation causes the increase of neuronal activity that leads to the drop in energy reserves in active neurons. This drop induces high metabolic demand, causing dilation of blood vessels and increase of the blood flow. Retina is known for the highest oxygen consumption per volume in human body. And retinal microvasculature might be divided in size into the following: the biggest vessels, arteries and veins, medium-sized arterioles and venules, and the smallest one, capillaries. As you can see in standard SLO image, only the big vessels and medium-sized vessels are clearly visible. The smallest one, capillaries, are not visible. The resolution is insufficient. But we can use adaptive optics to image them. Probably most of you know how adaptive optic works, but let me do a smaller revision. Wavefront coming from the eye is distorted due to aberration caused by ocular lens, tear film, cornea. And this distorted wavefront goes to the wavefront sensor that sends information about existing aberration to the deformable mirror, and it causes the modification of its surface to correct this aberration. Thanks to this procedure, we are able to image the eye structure with higher resolution. As you can see in this image, you are not able to see clearly the cones, and with AO, it's much more visible. We wanted, the purpose of the study, the whole study, we wanted to measure the change in diameter and the red blood cells velocity of the small retinal vessels due to the increased metabolic demand from full field flicker. We tested whether the vascular response differs in two locations with different ganglion cells layer thicknesses expected to have different metabolic demands. Now let's move to the methods. For imaging purposes, we use Indiana AO-SLO, a steerable imaging system with 2 optical channels to allow dual offset imaging that works like the offset imaging works similarly to the dark field microscopy, and the system enables to register simultaneously confocal and multiply scattered light with high contrast and magnification. Looking at the images, you can notice that both of them are slightly displaced relative one to another, and because of that, we can image at the same time two areas, the same area at two different times, but the temporal separation is smaller than the single capture frame. We imaged 11 young, healthy participants with no ocular or systemic disease, and their refractive error was below 2.5 diopters. We asked them not to consume any form of caffeine before of the experiment that day. For each of them, we gathered videos of two regions, one close to foveal vascular zone and the other one beyond 4.5 degrees from the fovea. Then we measured their vessel's lumen diameter with custom-built MATLAB program and divided by size into capillaries, smaller or equal to 10 microns, and bigger, that would be arterioles. In this study, we used wide full-field flicker that maintained the mean luminance within each stage of the experiment. During the baseline and recovery part of the experiment, the field was steady, while in the flicker part, the field alternated in square wave fashion at 100% contrast with 10 Hz frequency. The imaging session at previously selected locations were separated by 5 to 10 minute break. Each of the imaging sessions starts with 30 seconds of light adaptation followed by 2 minutes of imaging. After that, the participants were sitting for 1.5 minute break. For the flicker part, between the light adaptation and imaging part, there were like 30 seconds of flicker adaptation. In our study, we imaged 2 locations with different ganglion cells layer thickness. As I said previously, one close to the fovea and the other one more peripheral. For each of these locations, we chose 5 vessels and measured their diameter and red blood cells velocity, and then calculate RBC flow. Like here, you can see the images, offset images of both locations, and the vessels that I measured are marked with orange asterisks. Every vessel were measured at least 5 times along it in chosen area. As you can see here, these marked black lines are correlated with the points that I've chosen to measure the lumen diameter of the vessel. Let's move to the resultant conclusion. So in this graph, you can see the lumen diameter values of a single capillaries in baseline, flicker, and recovery parts. Even though the values slightly vary, they suggest a consistent response along the vessel. And also, as you can see, flicker increase the lumen diameter of the vessel. In this plot, you can see the relative change of lumen diameter in free conditions. In both locations, flicker induced bigger dilation in capillaries than in arterioles. The difference was statistically significant. This dilation returned rapidly to the baseline during the recovery period. What we expected was that the amount of ganglion cells would influence somehow the diameter of the vessels, but regardless of the measured locations, so different ganglion cells layer thicknesses, there was no difference in vasodilation. Here you can see the graph or relative RBC velocity, and the statistical analysis showed also that there's no difference between locations or vessel type. So there's no difference with the flicker and with the cells. The last part what we did, we calculated the normalized RBC flow. And as I showed in previous slide, I presented that there's no significant change of lumen and RBC velocity caused by flicker and measured location. Here also, the statistical analysis showed that relative RBC flow does not depend on location or vessel type. Other studies show that in bigger vessels, the dependencies of RBC flow on vessel diameter can be described as a power function. As you can see here, this approximation can be also applied to smaller vessels. As expected, this suggests that RBC flow varies strongly with lumen diameter changes. We also make this graph to see the dependencies between the RBC flow and relative lumen diameter. And even though there's a lot of overlapping areas in this plot, the induced flicker not only dilate more smaller vessels, but also make the relative RBC flow larger than capillaries. So to conclude, the vasodilation is greater in capillaries than in arterioles. The relative change in small vessel size is independent on their location. This dilation is distinct from what has been reported for larger vessels. The RBC flow and velocity change is independent on ganglion cells layer thickness and vessel size. The dependence of RBC flow on vessel diameter can be described by a power function, and vasodilation in capillaries influences the RBC flow more than arteriolar vasodilation. But the main conclusion that I would like to stay with you after my presentation is that ganglion cells layer thickness does not influence the vessel dilation in response to flicker in young, healthy controls. This could be due to upstream control of blood flow and the passive change in diameter for these small vessels, or due to a general balance between the vessels being supplied and the neural tissue. At the end, I would like to thank my lab members from Indiana University, NIH for financial support, and you for listening to my talk.
Thank you very much. The paper is open for discussion.
I didn't hear you say what the power is and then power function. Because if it was the square, it would be proportional to area. I wonder if that's maybe the way it turned out.
Oh, the power is 2.2.
2.2. Well, that's pretty close to the proportional to the area.
Yeah.
Okay, that might make an easier way to think about this.
Hi.
Where?
If I understood well,
Okay.
okay. In the flickering, you have a high intensity, so at the end, the mean is the same as the.
Yes.
It's not flickering. Yes.
Exactly.
So then I wonder if the effect that you are finding, the change, is because you are putting more light in the flickering with the maximum. I mean, have you tried to just put just a continuous value with the highest value of the intensity and see what happens?
So start with a high value,
yes,
and then modulate it.
No, I'm not flickering. Without flickering, but with the highest value of the
just intensity. Stable high value.
Yes.
We haven't tried that, but starting the high value of the let's say, the background of the stimulus that they're looking at, will cause probably some small dilation, but it won't last because the flicker itself caused the dilation. And when the flickers continue over some time, I don't remember right now the exact values, this phenomenon will disappear eventually. So, I don't know if it helps.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, short question, please.
Nice presentation. Very interesting topic. I was just wondering how the error that you have, for instance, if you access the error of the segmentation, and how the error in terms of the segmentation compares with the difference that you observed here, which was 11% that you reported.
Can you repeat that?
So, because your difference that you did the segmentation, right? So, and also you have error associated with segmentation. And I was wondering how the error of the segmentation compares with the results that you reported here.
I need to look at it. I don't have it in my head right now, but we can talk about it later.
Okay, please thank the speaker again. Retinal eye tracker, NeuroFET.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. I only want to add that this work is effect of cooperation between Collapse Copernicus University in Turin and startup Inoculum Vision. So, the brain is our most complex organ. They control the work of our whole body. So the investigation on activity of brain is very interesting topic, but also very technically difficult. So we can, of course, use EEG, but these measurements can be time-consuming and also not very comfortable for patient. So maybe we can change our thinking and not focus on measure the brain activity directly, but we can focus on measure the neural response. And for this purpose, the ideal candidate seems to be the eye movement, because when we look at this image, we can see how many structure of brain is involved in process of generation of eye movement. This is basic knowledge that we have three main types of eye movements, but it's made not so obvious that each of these types of eye movements is controlled by different parts of brain. So, of course, first of all, we have fixation eye movement, and this fixation eye movement occurs when we look at this at a stationary object. But even then, we have micro movements such as drift, tremor, and microsaccades. And the neural control of this movement are the superior cubiculus, cerebellum, and reticular formation. Second type of eye movement is saccade. This is rapid eye movement and occur when we want to change our gaze direction from one point to another. And the last eye movements are smooth pursuit movements. And these movements are slower and occur when we want to follow the constantly moving object. So, investigation of eye movements is especially interesting when we have the neurodegenerative disease. When we look at this literature review, we can see that every type of eye movement are disturbant in this neurodegenerative disease, such as Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, and Huntington's disease. And what is important in each of these neurodegenerative diseases, we have common symptoms such as longer saccade latency, shorter fixation instability, and also some impaired in smooth pursuit movements. Okay, so for now we know that we want to measure brain activity, but by using eye movements. So next question is how we can measure the eye movement. So we have two main types of eye tracking techniques. We have contact techniques and non-contact techniques. In first group, we have electroculography and search coils. These both techniques are very, very precise and accurate, but we should put something direct into the eyes or near to the eyes, so this procedure can change the natural behavior of the eye. So, of course, right now we prefer non-contact techniques, so we can use Purkinje reflection. So here we have two types of tracking method. We can use pupil and corneal reflection, so we have PCR methods. But we can choose the first and fourth Purkinje image, and we have dual Purkinje image eye tracking. But these techniques require the subject-dependent calibration for each measurement, which in a fundamental way limited the precision and accuracy of this measurement. So still we need new eye tracking techniques which are contactless and are precise and accurate as contact techniques, and this is the definition of retinal eye tracking. So now I want to present you retinal eye tracker NeuroFET, which was constructed in Torun. Our device consists of three main optomechanical modules. So first of all, we have a visual task display. This display is synchronized with our device, and we can display every visual task implemented in PsychoPy software. Then we have a pupil camera module. This module helps us in process of positioning patient, and also in this module we have infrared diode which illuminate the eye. But the most important and most innovative part of our device is this retinal tracking module. So the idea of this retinal tracking module is similar to SLO, but we can achieve much faster scanning frequency. How we do this? So in our device we have two types of scanners. We have MEMS scanners and galvo scanners, and these MEMS scanners allow us to obtain retinal image in very high frequency, but in relatively small area. So we have this second type of scanner, galvo scanner, which allow us to move this small part of small image across the whole retina. And as you can see, the scanning frequency is much higher than in typical SLO device. Okay, so how it's working in practice? So during measurements we have two types of data. We have pupil camera images, and we have also retinal images. At the start of every measurement, we collect something like a reference frame. So we move this small frame across the whole retina, so we can obtain the image of big part of retina. Next, during when the patient performs visual task, we only use this small part of retina, which we can choose as we want. And then in process of reconstruction, trajectory reconstruction, we match this small area for each frame to this big picture, and we know how the eye position changed. What is very important, our device didn't require any calibration. Okay, of course, when we talk about eye tracking, there exist two very important parameters: is precision and accuracy. And of course, we also measure these parameters. So we make this twice. First, we use, of course, artificial eye, but we choose the stationary object, and then we use object which moves with constant velocity. Okay, and here we can see the results. So here these graphs are for stationary object. These graphs are for moving objects. First column is accuracy. Then we have precision calculated twice, once as a standard deviation, and the second as a sample to sample minus root mean square. And what we can see that the accuracy change with amplitude or with velocity, and the smaller value is 0.16 arc minutes. For stationary object, the precision is relatively constant and is equal to 0.037 arc minutes or 0.025. And for moving object, this precision change, and here we can see the minimum value. Okay, but in clinical practice we didn't use artificial eye, so next step was to use real eye. So we made experiment which was very similar to this calibration experiment, calibration procedures used in VPO-based eye tracker. So we made the saccade experiments. So this target moves across this characterization grid. And what is and in each position the target appears twice. And what we can see here, so this is for first patient, this is for second patient, and when we compare these two pictures, we can see that this fixation pattern change very much between the subject. But what is maybe more important, that even the same patient can look at the same point twice at the same way. So if we remember that video-based eye tracker requires calibration, which is something like that, so how precise and accurate can be these measurements when this gaze position change, and this red one is at the beginning of experiment. So we can see similar results on these graphs representing smooth pursuit and saccade experiment. So our conclusion was that the sleep deprivation caused more shaking trajectory. So we talked about in which neurodegenerative disease this symptom is very visible. So we decided to measure patients with Parkinson's disease, and this project is in progress, and this is the first preliminary result. Please look at the range of the x-axis, and we can clearly see that even during fixation task, the eye changed position from minus 1.5 degree to 1.5 degree. Okay, similar results we can see in smooth pursuit and saccade experiment. Okay, only to conclude, our device is fully clinical. So we performed 3 clinical trials, and 1 is in progress. Only 1 minute. So we know that the retinal tracker have some limitation. So we should remember that we also have this anterior pupil camera. So in the next step, we want to combine these 2 eye trackers together. And we start this project in the October. So we still have position for PhD candidate.
Thank you very much. Very advanced technology. There is room for 1 question. Please, Jacek.
Thank you very much. It's very impressive, so very advanced technology indeed. I have a question. Am I right that the accommodation should be in some way paralyzed or set certain stimulus to get these measurements?
So our idea is, so we want to have the fully clinically available device. So we only focus to measure patient without any without tropicamide and so on. So it should be natural. So the idea of this research is that we don't want to touch the patient.
Okay, but can the patient accommodate during this examination?
No. The device is constructed for vision.
Okay, because eye tracker usually associates with the direction of the gaze. Okay, so you trace something slightly different. Of course, it's clinically very important, but it's not the traditional eye tracker. Okay, so it's oculography, of course, not eye tracker. That could be implemented, for example, in augmented reality glasses or something like that. Okay, but it's very nice. I have also many other questions, but I move them to the coffee session. Thank you very much.
I will give one question, maybe some. If we consider this as a standard clinical kind of procedure, is it necessary that we standardize some conditions such as, for example, part of the day that you do this, or?
Yeah, so this is the reason why.
In other words, are the results affected by when we are scanning in the morning or in the evening?
Okay, so idea behind this 24-hour experiment was, first of all, it was fun, but second of all, if we imagine that we are going to the blood measurements, I don't know, some hemoglobin or so on, it's very important that this measurement should be done morning. So our question was, we have very precise device, so when we should measure the patient. So at this pilot study, we showed that these changes occur, but now we want to perform second experiment, and we are looking for volunteers, 24 hours without sleep. Welcome.
Thank you. So please thank the speaker again. Enhancement.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it short, I promise. I know you're all starving. So I'm going to show how we can use an optimization algorithm in order to enhance images of the conjunctival vasculature. So the first question is, why would you like to study the vasculature in the conjunctiva if the vasculature in the retina is so interesting? So there are many diseases that they affect the vasculature of the different organs of the body. So the vessels are affected in many of the organs. So one thing of the conjunctiva is that it's one of the most vascularized tissues in the body. And so it gives a great opportunity to study a very dense vascular network in a very easy way. And it's also the conjunctiva, it's the only part of the body where we can see constituent blood vessels, without the need of any expensive instrumentation or any invasive technique. So in this case, in order to take images of the conjunctiva, we are actually taking small videos. We are going to use a very simple technique, which is a slit lamp, functional slit lamp by microscope, which is basically a slit lamp with a digital camera attached to it and a very fancy name. So we are going to be recording very short video sequences of the conjunctival vasculature, and well, then we are going to discard the chromatic information, so we will only keep the intensity values, and from all those frames for this work we are going only to choose one frame, which is the more focused frame of all the sequences. So now let's take a break and see how the image processing works in medical images. So normally, when we are processing images, we have an aim, which is either segment and structure. We want to extract features from some structures, or we want even to classify in order to produce a diagnosis. Whatever it's our objective, we almost always start for the pre-processing step of image analysis. And this step is very important because in this step it's in the one that we want to get the most of the image that we have. So we want to enhance the contrast of those structures that we are interested in studying, and we want to not amplify the noise of the image or even reduce the noise of the original image. So it's a very important step because it's going to determine how much we can extract from the final image. So for enhancing the contrast of the image, probably the most used technique is using a histogram equalization that basically redistributes the values of the original histogram in a more uniform histogram. The problem is like this is only it's only useful if the contrast that we have in the image that we are using is similar all along the image. Otherwise, it's going to produce a lot of noise, and we are going to lose a lot of details in those areas that they have different illumination or different contrast. That's why it exists the local histogram equalization, which does exactly the same, but it does it in small pieces of the image. This way, we don't lose that much information in some of the areas, but we still have a lot of noise amplification, and this is basically because when we have a very homogeneous area, we have these peaks in the histogram, and that's going to produce that we have much noise in the final image. So in order to solve that, we have the clip limit adaptive histogram equalization, which is exactly the same as the previous one, but in this case we're going to limit the amplification of the histogram and distribute all these values all along the original histogram. So that way we avoid the noise amplification in the most homogeneous areas, at the same time that we preserve the details of the structures that we want to study. The thing with the contrast limit adaptive histogram equalization, it's like it depends on two parameters, on the correct selection of two parameters. Those two parameters are the number of tiles in which we are dividing our image and the clip limit or the limit that we are putting to our histogram to be amplified. If these parameters are not correctly chosen for each image, the result is not going to be good enough. So when we are taking images of the conjunctival vasculature, we see that they can be very different, because with the slit lamp we are going to take many different magnifications. We also have different illuminations. So at the end, one image is very different to the other in terms of frequency content or the illumination that we have. So it's not likely that the same selection of these parameters, the number of tiles and the limit of the histogram, works for all the images. And that's why the objective of this work is to use an optimization algorithm, that in this case it's called the cuckoo search algorithm, in order to find the optimal numbers of these two parameters for each of the images that we are studying. So now, let's talk about the multi-objective cuckoo search algorithm. This is a meta-heuristic algorithm which belongs to those type of algorithms that they are based on or they try to model the behavior of some animals or some natural species. First, what is a meta-heuristic algorithm? This is simple an iterative procedure that is used to guide the search of a solution to a problem. It's used to guide the search to find an adequate solution. And the adequate is important, because normally when we use optimization algorithms, we try to find the best solution. In a meta-heuristic algorithm, we just want to find an adequate one. So it's not guaranteed that we are going to have the best solution, but just only one that works. And you will say, okay, well, why don't you use the one that is going to give you the best solution? It has some advantages, and first of all, it's very easy to implement, and it can be used to solve many problems, and I think the most important, it's much less computationally expensive than using an exact algorithm. In this case, the parameters that we want to solve, or our problem, is to know the number of tiles in which we have to divide the image, and the clip limit of the histogram for each of the image. Another thing that I want to explain before continuing is the multi-objective part. What does it mean that it's multi-objective? This means that we are going to assess how good it is the solution that we have found, not based on one criteria, but in more than one criteria. So many times when we use optimization algorithm, we say, we want the most expensive blah blah blah, or the biggest car, so that's one solution only. But many times we have to satisfy more than one criteria, and these criteria, they are in conflict. So if I increase a lot the contrast of my image, probably the noise of my image is going to go up also. So I can't give all the weights to the contrast, or I can't give all the weights to reducing the noise. That's why you use a trade-off solution, and that's why it's called multi-objective. In our case, what we want to do is to increase the entropy of the image while keeping the absolute mean brightness error to a minimum. The absolute brightness error, it tells us how much of the brightness we are keeping from the original image. So it's simply the difference between the mean brightness from the original image and the enhanced image. Okay. So now let's talk about biology. I have no idea about biology. So as I said before, the cuckoo search algorithm, it's based on the natural behavior of cuckoo birds. So the cuckoo birds, some of the species of cuckoo birds, they don't build their own nests. So what they do is they look for nests that they are already built by other birds, and they put their eggs. So in order to do this, the cuckoo bird needs to imitate the eggs of the host bird. Otherwise, the host mama bird is going to say, hey, this is not my egg, I'm throwing it away. Or it's going to just abandon the nest and build a new nest. Okay, so this is the basic idea behind this algorithm. In our case, an egg, it's a solution. That means one egg is the number of tiles in which we want to divide the image and the limit. And then we're going to say if our egg is good or not based on the fitness function that that we use many times to assess like solutions. In this case, as I said before, the fitness function that we are going to use is to study the entropy of the image and to study the losing brightness of the image. So in a very, very, very simple way, just imagine that we have a host egg. This is the egg that was in the host nest. And it has a number of tiles, and it has a click limit. And if we apply these numbers to the histogram equalization, we get this image. Then we are going to do a random solution, which is the cuckoo egg. Okay? So our random solution is this. We have a different number of tiles and a different click limit. And this gives us another image. So what we are going to do now, it's mama bird going to realize. So in order to know that, we are going to assess how good that image is. We are going to see the entropy of the image and the losing brightness of the image, and we are going to decide if it's better than the original solution or not. In this case, it's worse than the original solution. So we are going to reject the cuckoo, we are going to throw the cuckoo, and we will keep the host egg. And then we're going to do this again. It's an iterative algorithm, so this is done for a number of times. And we have a new egg, and with different parameters, and we are going to assess the same parameters. And in this case, we see that the new egg is actually better than the cuckoo, than the host egg. So in this case, we reject the host egg, and we keep the cuckoo egg. And this is repeated, and that's why our solution is getting better, and better. This here, I was talking about one nest, but this is done with 60 nests at the same time. That means that I have 60 solutions that they are all improving at the same time. And at the end, I will just keep the best of the solution, and I will reject all the worst solutions. So for this study, we took 42 conjunctival images of the conjunctival vasculature with different illumination settings, with different magnifications, and then we are going to assess the quality of the image using both techniques, the classical control limit adaptive histogram equalization with a set parameters for all the image with its 8 by 8 the number of tiles and this clip limit, and then we are going to use the optimized algorithm, and we are going to compare the quality of the image. The quality of the image, we are going to compare it by calculating the image entropy, which is going to tell us if the contrast is better. The absolute mean brightness error, which is going to tell us if we are keeping that brightness from the original image. And then we are also going to see how much noise are we adding to the image by using a full reference method, which is the peak center noise to ratio, and the fast noise variance estimation, which is a non-reference method to estimate the noise of an image. And it's based on the variance of a Laplacian filter. So when we did this, we see that both methods, like the classical Cly and the optimized Cly, they both enhance the contrast of the image. And the optimized Cly enhances even more the contrast of the image, and it's significantly different. And it also keeps more brightness from the original image. And you might say that, well, yeah, it has the entropy, but it's not a great thing, even though it's significant. This is also because when we set these parameters, the 8x8 and 0.005, that was already optimized to enhance the entropy of the image. So even if this difference between the classical Cly and the optimized Cly is very small, it's very significant, because in both cases I tried to optimize the entropy of my image. And what's more, in the optimized one, I keep much more brightness. I mean, you cannot see it here very well, but this one has more noise than this one. So if now we compare the noise that we are adding to the image, we see that the optimized method has higher PSNR and has also lower, I didn't say it before, but lower fast noise variance estimation. It's less noise, and it has less noise. So we can see that it keeps noise amplification to a minimum compared with the classical histogram equalization. And to finish, we see or we realize that many times it's difficult to use fixed parameters that accommodate all the images that we are working with. So many times we need to change those parameters in order to increase the possibilities of extracting more information of that image. And that's what an optimization algorithm does. And in particular, the cuckoo search algorithm, it's a multi-objective version. It's able to produce images with higher contrast and less noise compared to the classical contrast limit histogram equalization. This might be useful for further steps in which we have to use the image to either diagnose, classify, or extract filters. And that's all. I think
The discussion is open.
Hi, very nice presentation. And is it possible to check the comparative study with some other algorithms like artificial decommissioning or even particle sum optimization also?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
So, is it possible to compare this algorithm with some other algorithms?
Yes.
Like PSO or ABC?
Yeah, you can compare it to other algorithms. I just took this one because I liked it. Well, no, and its performance, I saw that its performance for other tasks, it was pretty good. It's just been used one before to work with enhancing images, like it's used for very different things, but yeah, for sure it's possible. The thing with the cuckoo search, it has an advantage compared to other algorithms, and it's that you need to set very few parameters for it to work well. Like, you have to set the number of iterations, the population of nests that you want, and pretty much that's all. So it makes it very convenient.
But so even every datasets we could adjust the parameters or?
Sorry again?
All the datasets, so the parameters will be constant or we need to adjust the?
Well, the parameters that you choose for all the datasets, it should be okay. I mean, because the parameters that you are setting, it's just the number of iterations. Like, if you have Yeah, it's the same for every data set. I mean, depends on your image also. Like, depending on your image, you may want more or less. Me, for example, you also have to give like a region where you want it to look for. For example, I say from 2 blocks in the image to 14 blocks. So also depends on how big is your region. If you say you can divide the image in 2 or in 4, probably you need much less iterations. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay, please thank Clara again and all the speakers for the session.